before his current responsibilities, he worked as a professor in the Department of History at Assam University, Silchar. Professor Tripathi is a highly respected scholar known both in India and abroad for his remarkable contribution to historical and archaeological research. In addition to his academic pursuit, he holds the prestigious position of Additional Director General Archaeological Survey of India and is presently overseeing the significant work related to the Gyanvapi site. His expertise extends to numerous archaeological expeditions, with one of his most notable contribution being the underwater exploration of the legendary city of Dwarka, a pioneering effort that has shed new light on India's maritime heritage. Today he will be sharing his insight on architectural marvel in ancient India, offering us a deeper understanding of the engineering brilliance, artistic mastery, and scientific precision that defined India's architectural legacy. His expertise in both terrestrial and underwater archaeology make him the perfect guide to unravel the secret of India's architectural wonder. We are truly privileged to have him with us, and we eagerly look forward to an enlightenment session. Please help me in extending a warm welcome to Professor Alok Tripathi, sir. Thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation. And now it's up to you because we really want to hear from your side.
Thank you, Ravindji, for inviting me and also for good words which you shared with the participant. I think there might be their hopes or expectations might have increased a lot. Let me share my thoughts on architectural marvels of ancient India. Would you prefer in English or Hindi? What is the majority want?
Sir, bilingual is more
Okay.
preferred.
Okay, so let me share the screen. Is it permitted from that side?
No, sir, not yet.
Please.
Actually, no, from our side it is permitted, but not.
Okay. Okay, I'm sharing. Is it visible?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. Is it full screen? Let Is it full screen?
Uh,
Are slides changing?
no, sir. Actually, you just do. It is not in full screen.
Okay. Let me manage with this then. Can you read what is on the screen?
Yes, sir. Yes.
It's readable? Okay.
Yes, sir.
So fine. So friends, today let me share my thoughts about architectural marvels. I'm not going to talk about what all written in literature. I'm also not going to talk about development of temple architecture or fort architecture or any particular type of architecture in any particular type of period. The topic is very vast. Therefore, I would be touching some of the aspects of architectural marvels from some of the important reasons or areas. आई एम श्योर हम सभी लोग जानते हैं कि आर्किटेक्चर जो है इट्स ए नाउन, और जब हम आर्किटेक्चर की बात करते हैं वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट द आर्ट or practice or designing of buildings. So the architecture has different connotations in different relations. But today we are focused more on the buildings or the structures which has been created, which has been designed during the entire period of Itihas, since the beginning of these buildings. Building is again a very different terms. Generally, when we use building, it gives a different image. But here it can be taken for any kind of a structure. Even a small hut should be taken in the sense of building, because when initially it is started somewhere in Neolithic period, they were the small structures which were created by humans, whatever was capable or whatever material was available with them for their first residential purpose, and later on they were extended for different other practices. So they had different styles, they had different purposes, they have used different material. And when we study architecture today, we are talking only about what we have found, what existed, because there would have been many more things which we have not inherited. They have been destroyed, or they were made of the material which could not survive. So our knowledge is limited to what we have found, and this is a very important point. जनरली क्या होता है कि हम लोग कई मुद्दों पे बहुत बहस भी करते हैं कि ऐसा था और ऐसा नहीं था। वास्तव में हम नहीं जानते कि क्या था और क्या नहीं था, क्योंकि हम जो चर्चा करते हैं वो उन प्रमाणों के आधार पर करते हैं जो हमको आज तक मिले हैं। और हमको इस बात को बहुत अच्छे से समझना चाहिए कि जितना हम जानते हैं उसके बियॉन्ड बहुत कुछ अभी अनजान बचा हुआ है, और हमारे ज्ञान में धीरे धीरे वृद्धि हो रही है। समय के साथ हमको नए प्रमाण मिलते हैं और उससे हमारी जो जानकारी वो बढ़ती रहती है। सो वट एवर वी रीड, राइट और प्रेजेंट, दैट इज ऑल बेस्ड ऑन what we know. There is much more we don't know. इसी तरह से जब आर्किटेक्चरल की बात करते हैं, इट्स एन एडजेक्टिव. So when we say architectural marvel, we are talking about almost any structure which has been created in the past. और जब हम मार्वल को लें तो यानी वी आर टॉकिंग समथिंग अबाउट कुछ जो है आश्चर्यजनक है, बहुत बड़ा, बहुत भव्य. जनरली हम जो कहते हैं ना EST, ग्रेटेस्ट, हाईएस्ट, बिगेस्ट, लोएस्ट, सो काइंड ऑफ थिंग. बट अगेन जब मार्वल की बात करते हैं तो हमको एक बात और ये ध्यान में रखनी चाहिए कि हम किस देश और काल की बात कर रहे हैं. क्योंकि जो आज हमारे लिए एक बहुत छोटा सा इनसिग्निफिकेंट स्ट्रक्चर हो सकता है, इतिहास के एक पीरियड में दैट स्मॉल स्ट्रक्चर वुड हैव बीन ए आर्किटेक्चरल मार्वल. For example, as being an underwater archaeologist, I deal with the boats and the ships. So today, what is a boat for us was a ship in the past. तो एक छोटा सा स्ट्रक्चर किसी समय में उनके लिए एक आर्किटेक्चरल मार्वल रहा होगा, लेकिन यदि हम मुझे आज 21वीं सदी में देखें तो हमको लगता है कि ये तो एक छोटी सी इनसिग्निफिकेंट स्ट्रक्चर है. तो उसको जब इतिहास में हम देखेंगे तो हमको उसका महत्व समझ में आता है. तो इसके लिए ये चीज एक जरूरी है. आई नीड नॉट टू टेल, ऑल ऑफ यू आर फ्रॉम द एकेडमिक बैकग्राउंड, that whenever we see anything, we have to see it in the time and space. Then only we can really appreciate its importance, and then only we can understand its value. Before I come on the period, I just also want to just touch what is the legal position of these structures of building of historical importance. Our constitutions divide subjects in three lists, which are related to the central list, state list, and concurrent list. So the monument, which are the historical buildings, in a sense, they comes under list 1 of the 7th schedule, which are of national importance, and all other structures which are of historical importance but not of national importance, they are in the state subject. So legally ये जो architectural marvels हैं या जो ancient architecture है, जो ancient monuments हैं, they are the responsibility of the central government and the state government. सो वो जो राष्ट्रीय महत्व के हैं वो केंद्र सरकार की सूची में आते हैं और उसकी जिम्मेदारी है। उसके अलावा सारे प्राचीन स्मारक जो हैं वो राज्यों की जिम्मेदारी है, क्योंकि ये राज्य का विषय है। दिस इज हाउ द monuments and sites have been divided. The another thing which I want to touch is the word ancient, क्योंकि हम बात कर रहे हैं ancient architectural marvel. The word ancient, if you take in terms of history, it has a specific period. But when we talk about architecture, we follow the definition which is given in Ancient Monuments, Archaeological Sites and Remains Act, and where any structure which is 100 years old or more is an ancient monument. And there are different varieties. This definition, which is given in section 2, is relevant, and I would like all of you to pay attention what it defines as a monument, or you can call it also as an architecture, because it deals about with any structure, erection, monument, any tumulus or place of interment, any cave, rock sculpture, inscription, monolith, which is of historical, archaeological, artistic interest, and other things. So it also considered anything which is constructed, and second, it is immovable. And third is, since it is constructed, it is above the ground in general. Another thing is that it does not differentiate in the man-made or natural. Even something natural which is used by man can also be a monument and can be considered, because we have examples where certain natural features have been utilized for constructing the other buildings, maybe of the temple or some other shelters and other things. So it may be a combination of that. So we should have a clarity about the fundamental aspects of architecture. Now, this example, once upon a time, a small hut like this would have been a architectural marvel. It's most probably made of the perishable material, and whatever architectural remains we find are generally of those which are made of mud, bricks, stone, or other material, because there was a large phase in our itihas where these different buildings were made using wood and other similar materials. In our excavations, we have found evidence of that. Excavations at Patliputra in Patna, there have been a very means that the famous 80 pillared hall where the wooden pillars were used. Even the fortification at Ujjain that was made of wood. So there were huge public architecture. They were made using the wood. But with the time, these materials have perished, and today we don't find them existing as what we find, which are made of non-perishable material, something like stone and bricks. So our knowledge is more based on what we find in the existing structure. And even in existing structure, we have imprints of the other structures which did not survive. They are in the form of art or even the replication of wooden architecture. And if you see that, that will give you an idea about the Indian knowledge, you can call them, about this architecture. There are a number of literary compositions where you have this entire philosophy here, the science of constructing building, where they have defined everything, that how a building should be made, where it should be made, how you test the soil, what kind of material should be used, and what should be the purpose, direction, height, depth, everything they have defined it. And when you read it, you will understand that how deeply they had understood the architecture. And survival of these ancient structure till date itself is a certification that the mastery which they have achieved in architecture and the heavens became stable. It's the just the beginning of architecture, and he started making houses. And that time, making these small dwellings would have been the height of their science and technology, which was available with them. And you have these structures which are above the ground, some of them are under the ground. So this is how they made the house, and they had the superstructure, which in most of the cases does not survive. What we find only the remains in the form of post holes, or sometimes the impression of soil, particularly if it got burned on the wattle and top structures, which indicates us this what kind of houses they were making and living. So you have a variety. They are of different shapes and sizes. Excavation reveals that what kind of activities were performed in these houses, because you find evidence of that, and interpretation help you to understand or reconstruct the life in these buildings. When you progress a little more, when the copper is introduced and the Chalcolithic phase starts, and during this period, what we call the urban phase of Indian civilization, that is also known as Indus civilization, you find the huge cities, huge planned cities, having a variety of architecture. This is a satellite image from Dholavira, which is one of the largest settlement of Indus civilization and one of the finest city of that period in the in India. Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, which were excavated earlier, are well studied, well known. This is a site which was excavated by Archaeological Survey of India. And here you see some of the architecture which is really mind blowing. And the height of technology which they have achieved and implemented even won't be seen in many of the modern towns and cities. This city, which was a perfect uh, uh, geometrically, it was properly designed. It has a outer fortification and was divided in three parts. The main was the citadel, then there was a middle town, and also the lower town. And this settlement has huge water reservoirs, which is something which you don't find on many of other sites. The river which you see flowing on the two sides, it's a seasonal nala, if you call it today. And the water which was coming during rainy season was collected through by constructing dams. This water was routed, and then it was collected in the huge tanks, a series of tanks. This is a cross section of this site showing different phases of architecture. And this is the main part of the city, what is called the citadel. And this fortification, if you see, you will find like the modern or the later forts where very intricate entries were planned so that whoever is coming enters after taking several turns, and it is well guarded by the probably the guards, because this would have been the most important place of the city. And since this city is constructed by using the stones, therefore we are in position to find all these details of ancient architecture. If suppose it was made of the mud bricks as we find in Rakhigadi or at other places, we would not have got them so well preserved, because they would have been easily destroyed during these thousands of years, where they have been used for different purposes, or even later settlements were there, so they are affecting the earlier or the lower levels. This is how beautifully these walls were made. And this is an inscription which is very famous, 10 letter inscription, which was probably a signboard on the city. And you see this intricately planned and beautifully made architecture using the local material. Now, this use of the material is again a very important thing, because early architecture you would find like what we find today, that if you go anywhere east, west, north, south, you will find concrete jungles. And it is a very, very recent phenomena. Few years back, just few decade backs, if you would have traveled in different part of the countries, you would have witnessed different material used for architecture and different style of architecture. But this sudden globalization has brought a big impact on this architect, means on Indian architecture as well, and almost a uniform pattern of the architecture now you witness every part, whether it's a small village or it's a metro city, you will be finding more or less same type of material and same type of architecture. This was a very unique city where you have this kind of grand architecture, different kind of pillars which are made of huge blocks. We could also notice find a quarry site from where this material was coming, and similar type of stones even you find and the material at Harappa. So it was not only consumed locally, but even it was transported to other cities of that period. So by putting these small pieces together, one can imagine how grand this city would have been. And definitely, the architecture of this town, even in terms of, though it's 5,000 years old, but even if you see it from today's point of view, it will definitely qualify for an architectural marvel. These are the huge water reservoirs. Just you can see the size, which were used to store water for the entire city. And this water net means water engineering, you can call it, was really of high degree. Every drop of the water was collected. It was channelized through different drains, and then it was collected in this series of tanks. And all these tanks were connected to each other. When one tank is filled, water pass to the next one, so that the entire water can be collected. And just you can see the size of drains. A person can walk through these drains. So the water coming from different levels gather in common drains, and these drains finally lead to the reservoirs. So these are the really marvels of engineering, and their hydraulic engineering as concerned, that was unparalleled. Nowhere in the world you will find in this period such a grand or great hydro engineering in use for uh, developing or maintaining any city. These are a series of small tanks inside. So they had different purposes for which they have designed things. So it's not only the public architecture, but also the private. the houses, the dwellings, and these are the part of the city where you see that well planned streets and roads cutting each other on 90-degree, and they were so wide that even two or three cars can run parallelly. See the size of this long street running from one end of the city to the other end. And this is how this city would have been. So this is one of the earliest example of a well-planned city where Indians has achieved highest degree of city planning, water engineering, and their architecture was highest or of the advanced quality of means of a stage if you compare to that period. After that, there is a long period, as I mentioned, where wood was used because we get evidence from different places, and most of the structures were made, be it temples, be it the palaces or the fortifications or any other structure. They were made of wood, and we have got a few evidence of that in excavation, and therefore we don't find more structures surviving during this period. From the Mauryan period, we start again getting these pillar capitals. Some of them are still standing on their side. In a just one look, they may not impress many visitors because they are just a shaft with or without uh, an animal figure on the top. But if you see them closely, you will realize that construction of these pillars and their transportation and erection was a big challenge which cannot be made unless you have a very advanced techniques for that. We know that they are made of chunar sandstone, transported all the way to the length and breadth of the country, and the figures crowning them from art point of view are the very they are the example of classical art of that period. Some of these have fallen and they are still preserved, and if you closely observe them and study them, you will find that what techniques or knowledge and art and craft they had in that early phase of history. These are the two famous pillars from Rampurva, which have been excavated. And if you have a look of this trench, probably you can appreciate better their size and gravity. And you will also understand how monolithic pillar is, how they would have been means how this stone would have been cut out from the quarry. It would have been shaped, transported all the way, erected there, and then the crowning piece, which is a which are the unique pieces of art or masterpieces, you can say, of the Mauryan art, or you can also say the earliest phase or earliest art what we find in the historical period. So they are the examples which we have found. But it's not that the people were having or erecting only the pillars. Those who were erecting these pillars were also having equally high and advanced palaces. They had cities and towns, they had temples, and many other public architecture. We have got some of the evidence of these uh, architectural marvels which were created during that period in the excavation which have been conducted. But it is unfortunate, again, let me mention that we have not paid due attention to the historical period. Because once in 1920, when the Harappa was excavated, which pushed the history of India from 3rd century BCE to third millennium BCE. It captured attention of every archaeologist, and since then there have been so much emphasis on Harappan archaeology or this early phase of our history that people have somewhere ignored the historical part, for which we also have a sufficient literature available to corroborate what we are finding. And then it becomes a little difficult also, because it requires a lot of skill where one can do these both things together. But whatever we have done tells us about that great creations which were made by the architects, engineers, or artists of that period. This tradition continues even up to very late period in some form, because this fascination for pillars, there are a variety of pillars. There are very good publications on pillars itself. You can find it, where you see that in the early periods, in almost every period during the reigns of every king, different kind of pillars were erected, and this tradition continues even to the very late period. Even today it continues. So you find that there are the everybody knows is standing in in Delhi here in Mehroli. So the different materials, it's not only the stone, but even the metal was used. And there are certain metallic pillars which are the classical example of architecture, but they are not the only pillars which were created. As we know, there were many more which have either been converted, transported, or reused for other purposes. So this tradition continues, and later on we find that even it takes a shape of building. And here is a Vijay Stambh, which is called again a pillar, victory tower, though they call in English, but Hindi is Vijay Stambh, means the pillar. So this fascination for pillar, which start from the very early period, and it's not only that the Mauryan king had these pillars. Prior to that also, we have in our literature mentions of erecting pillars. There are Yupa pillars. Some a number of inscribed Yupa pillar is also found existing. They are existing even today. Some of them are even declared as the monument of national importance. And prior to that, even the wooden pillars have been erected, and we have certain examples where inscribed wooden pillars have been found. So this tradition, which started from the very early period, continues till late. So that is one category which capture the fascination in all the periods of Itihas. The another category, I'm just broadly putting them on the basis of purposes, is the sepulchral or grave related. So this is a excavated coffin from very famous site Sanoli, and then you find that different kind of structures were created which were related with the cremation or burial, and this tradition continues in the form of stoop. And stoops, again, if you know, of course, we find a large number of stoop during early historical period, but even at Dholavira, you have a burial which is in the stoop form during the Harappan period. And it has a very well planned inner architecture which was exposed and documented during the excavation. So this form of architecture again develops from a simple heap of mud to a grand architecture. And you have a variety of stoop. You have Jain stoop, you have Buddhist stoop, and also earlier stoops. And then they were very well embellished with using the material whichever is available in different parts. Some of them were, or the early stoops were generally of mud, but later on bricks and stones were used and they were beautifully carved. Some of them have still survived. In Kesaria, we have a large stup which is having 6 or 7 tiers. We have the famous stup at Sarnath. We have this Sanchi stup, which is the most intact stup which has survived right from the Mauryan period, which is the inner core, and then it was enlarged in Shunga period. And during Gupta period, certain additions were made. So again, this itself is so fascinating that during the British period, they were so fascinated with the architecture of this stup. I'm talking about Sanchi, that they were planning to transport one of the Toran to London. It was planned, but thanks to the World War, that during that period they could not dismantle and transport it. So these torrents survived. If there was no World War, one of these torrents would have been seen in the Museum of London today. Then we move to the rock cut architecture, which is a separate category. And when you study the rock cut architecture, which is also sometimes said as the cave architecture, but we should understand when we say cave, we are talking about natural structure. And when we talk about man-made, it is the rock cut because the rock is purposely cut for that and this architecture is created. And if you see the rock cut architecture, you will realize actually it is copy of wood architecture in the rock, because in this picture itself you can see these rafters on the top, and these rafters are actually the they are replicated from the wooden architecture. In wooden houses you have these rafters and then above that you have the ceiling, but when they copied it in the rock, they copied these all wooden elements. And even in the Gupta period and some later Gupta period, stone temples, if you see, you will find some of these elements even replicated in the structural temples or structures which were built. This tradition of the rock cut has again sub varieties. You have the chaitya, you have the halls, and you also have the cutouts. So this is cut in where the architecture is cut inside the rock, and you also have the cutouts where the rock has been cut and the this structures comes out. This is a photographs from Mahabalipuram, the famous Panch Pandavrat, and the best example of cutout structure is the Kailash temple at Ellora, cave number 16, which is the largest and the finest example of the rock cut architecture. Here, the work begins from the top, and the artist or the sculptor or the architect, whoever working on that, moves down. And this itself shows that how meticulous planning and designing they had so that they could create these marvels of architecture. The picture which you are seeing are now inscribed on the World Heritage List. So has the Ellora. And this you will find is left unfinished. So the upper portion is finished, it is fully done, but this lower portion is unfinished. And at that place, means at that time, the work was stopped and these structures could not be completed. So this itself is a different category and it requires different techniques to make these structure. And you will find a great difference in the designs if you go to the different parts of the country. So there is a difference in the material, there is a difference in the design. Of course, you will find that certain components remains the same. and that all depend on the utility, whether it is a funerary architecture, it's a residential architecture, or it's a defense architecture. It has certain requirement that varies from place to place and period to period. And accordingly, the architects of that period had designed and created these marvels. And if you carefully see them, one can really understand the what great thinking and planning has gone in creation of this structure. I do not know how many of you have gone and talked to these structures. If you have not done it, please go and do that. But that won't happen if you have a visit. So there is a visit, generally people have it, even the historian and archaeologists. They visit a site. And there is another thing where you go and understand these sites. But understanding cannot be done in the visits. So there is a basic difference in these. So once you go, talk to these monuments and try to visualize that how they have been created, you don't require any book, article, or anything. You yourself will see from your eyes that how this structure is being constructed. And if you can have that
हेलो
experience, I think
हेलो
it will give you
हाँ
the
मोनिका
real knowledge of ancient Indian
हेलो
architecture, right from the
हाँ टाइम मिल गया को
foundation
कॉल करने
till
का
the top shikhar of that.
टाइम मिल गया
Try
कॉल
to
करने
just
का
visualize, go there, observe,
टाइम
and
मिल गया कॉल
see
करने का टाइम
how the foundation would have been made, then
ए
how it is
वाह
filled, how its structure, walls, pillars is
तुम तो पूछते भी
erected,
नहीं हो ना बिल्कुल
then
भी
the
कॉल
beams are
नहीं
put
कोई
on
कुछ
that,
नहीं
then you have the
और
rafters or
कुछ भी नहीं
ceiling, then
करते
shikhar is being constructed, and finally a structure is ready.
गलत बात है ना ये
It may be a palace, it may be a house,
कम से कम कॉल तो कर
it
लिया
may
करो
be a cave temple, and then you realize that how, what was the real knowledge or gyan which created these masterpieces. It's not only that the structure, means we are talking about the architecture, but there are certain arts, they are also in form of architecture. So like this is an cutout, so is this cutout, and there are many more. Even in this complex itself, you can see a Nandi here. There is a famous lion and also an elephant. I'm sure that you all are aware of that. So, like these cutouts, even there are others which, though you may consider them as art, but they themselves are architecture as well. Similarly, this huge cutout from a rock bed in Rajasthan, and there are in different parts, right from Nepal, you will find up to southern part of the country. There are different such artistic creation, which in self is also qualified for architecture. When we come to the temple architecture and start seeing the structural temples, we know that earlier temples were made of perishable material from Besnagar and from other places. We have in excavation, we have evidence at Sarnath that in the early centuries of the Common Era and prior to that, many apsidal temples were made using wood and other material, and their remains still existed. But from the Gupta period, we start getting the structural temples. Though this small hut-like or a small house-like structure may appear to us today a very common structure. But if you go back in the time and see, it would have been a great achievement during that period. So whenever you have to see any structure, you have to travel in the past and then see, then only you can appreciate how these structures were constructed and what all has gone behind its creation. This Maladevi temple, I am sure that those who have studied art and architecture are familiar with it, which is again a combination of both. The natural rock has been used, and with this structural temple has been constructed at a particular place, which is one of the important phase of temple architectural development. So one has to see that how what is being utilized and how it is being created. And the combination of these two create many challenges, because working in one medium is much easier than working in two mediums. Often you find that there are experts, engineers, planners, or architects who are working in a one kind of material or one type of architecture. But if one has to do the combination of two different things, it requires special skills. And if someone can do that, that shows their high skills and capabilities. This is the most famous example of Nagar style of temples at Khajuraho, where the Chandel architecture reaches to its culmination. And the most important thing is that luckily we have this example in almost intact condition, because most of the architectural marvels which were created in the past did not survive in full. Many of them have got damaged. Some we have remains in different phases of their survival, but there are some where we could find them somehow, because they were made in such a way, they were maintained properly, and they have survived for hundreds of years. So this is where it reaches to its culmination. But again, when you want to study, if you see this reason, you will find that it's not that suddenly this style of architecture emerges from somewhere out of the blue. This place itself offers you the entire history of development of temple architecture. There are early temples which are made using the local material, that is a granite. It's not a very good quality. Actually, it's a poor quality granular and dark color granite which they used for early temples, which were quite small, simple, with few moldings and bas reliefs. Slowly, with the time, when the prosperity increased, the political power increased, financial conditions increases, they had made more developments in the architecture as well. So architecture, in a sense, also reflect the technical development of society. It also speaks about the political stability. It also speaks about the economic condition of the society. So they are not only the structure, but they are the witness of the past who have seen the entire history. And if we study them, we can understand the past in a better way. At the same time, it also tells about the level of knowledge, the indigenous knowledge, what we are talking about here in the Gyan Kumbh or Indian knowledge system, that also tells that what was the knowledge of the society during a particular period. And it's not only a one particular knowledge, but the entire, their religious beliefs, their economic condition, political condition, economic condition, advancement in science and technology, literature, everything is put in these stones, or you can say is written in this stone, provided one can read it. And that reading require certain interaction with these remains, which generally appears to be dry. But those who are habitual, for them, they are really filled with all this information, which gives you the pleasure which you can find at other places. And these grand structures, which were constructed during the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th century, their size was increasing. And one of the grand structure what we have at of the 13th, 14th century of Ganga period at Konark. Here we have only the mandapa which is surviving. A part of the Garbhagriha and the Shikhar was existing during the British period, but that has even collapsed. But its mandap itself tells that what the main temple would have been. And construction of this temple shows the advancement of engineering technology of Indians of that period. It has now many challenges as far as conservation is concerned, which are being dealt by the archaeologist. But these remains are the testimony of the architectural advancement during this period. If you glance to the south, you will find a big difference, not only in the style, but also in the material as well as the size of these temples. And again, it is not that they were not advanced or they were poor in any sense, but again, it depends on the utility. What was the need? And at most of the time, what advancements were made are need based. So one has to very clearly understand that the size of any architecture is not directly related with the advancement of in any field. If you require a small structure for a different
Hello?
purpose, whatever capabilities you may
Hello?
have, you will make a small structure.
Hello?
And if you have to make a large
Hello?
structure, then you will show that how best you can
Hello?
create a large structure. So it's not that if there is somewhere you are having a smaller structure, they were inferior in any field or at any rate. It was only because they had a different requirement. There may be regional requirement or compulsions. It may be because of the material, or it may be because of certain other reasons. So that all has to be seen. So if you see, compare the temples in the north and south, or east and west, you will find that there are certain peculiarities which are driven by their necessity, regional compulsions, or the requirements. These structures height wise are smaller, but if you see in their art, they are far advanced than any other temples of that period. The carving which is done on that, the material which is used, this is an Hoysal period and a Hoysal style temple. Here they have used a soft stone, and the kind of carvings which are done on them are mind boggling. One can wonder how somebody can carve such fine images, and the kind of ornamentation, the kind of designs and the scenes which are there, which takes you, actually it shows like a film of that period where you can see everything happening from your own eyes. It is something like you are traveling that, I mean, 700, 800 years back and seeing things happening in front of your eyes. So the size may be smaller, but the other things what you find is far more superior. It is not that all the temples were of a smaller size. At the same time, or even in earlier period, you find the temples which are very huge, high, and almost like a fort. This here you can see if it is the entire complex. In certain other temples, you find that the main temples remain smaller, what is called Viman, but its peripheral structures they increase in height. Generally, the Gopur of the temples in southern part of the country, they are very high. You have 3-storied, 5-storied, 9-storied, 11-storied structures, which are much higher. Whereas if you see the Viman, that will be a smaller one. So the size of a structure alone doesn't tell you about the skills, engineering, material, or all kind of things which are available in a particular period. Inverted in the art. And these galleries or the corridors are like the art museums. If you see the kind of detailing which has been done there, that will speak a lot. So that will tell you the skills which artist had, the architect had, the sculptors had, and the mastery with which they have created these masterpieces. Every part of the temple is cut like butter, you can say, or the wood. Though the stone is hard, but with their skills they have converted it in the art pieces. If you move towards the northeast, which has a different geographical setting, it has a different conditions there, you will find the same traditions but in a different form. You have rock cut architecture there, you have artistic embellishment, and you also have the temple construction there. But you will find that there is a big difference in the design. Though on plan and in elevation, the basic elements remain the same, but based on again their requirement and the needs, they have made the new interventions or modifications. Here again, the early structures which were of wood did not survive. Even the stone structures which were constructed, for which we have evidence right from Gupta period at least, but they are in the ruined condition because tectonically this region is very active and earthquakes is a common phenomena here. Learning with that, they started constructing temples using the brick, and these structures generally have a very thick wall, a very special type of foundation which can bear these jerks, and these temples survived even for hundreds of years. If you move to the north, you will find again you have a different material which is generally the pebbles and the mud, but using that, these large structures, be it monasteries, chaitya, or the temples, they were created and they have been surviving in different states of preservation. And whatever we have found can tell us about the high engineering and the technical skills which they have achieved in that period. Their shapes again are somewhat influenced from the ground realities. They have influence from different interaction, but they are also the practical aspects. And at the left, you can see this is snow covered temples, which can tell you how these slopy roofs were constructed in these structures. These palatial buildings on the rocky cliffs in Leh, and these palatial structures in the central India has a huge variation, and this variation shows our adaptability in different climatic conditions with our technical skills. Water has been dear to all, and it's not only the palaces which are constructed in the water, but also the forts. And we know that we have different varieties of forts. There are Jaldurg, there are on the hills, and there are different kind of. And some of the finest water forts are also constructed by using our indigenous knowledge of the architecture. And some of them are the finest and the largest forts which we have in India, which are known world over. At the left, you see the Kumbhalgarh. On the right, you have the Gwalior Fort, which is one of the most beautiful and decorated forts in the country. If you see their shapes and sizes, you will realize that how the natural features were utilized for constructing these huge architectures and also keeping their defense requirement in view. So that is what the skills of Indian architects, Indian skills, our knowledge is. And it's the need which creates many aspects or many peripheral units of any architecture. At the left, you have a temple, on the right, you have a fort. But if you have a view, you will find them more or less same because they are as used as a palace or a fort and have the components which are essential part of that particular architecture for which it has been created. This is natural but a protected monument. So it's not that only the everything had to be created. There were many natural wonders which has been also utilized for other means architectural purposes. With this I stop here. I would be happy as it's all going to be 2:30, and I'll be happy if you have queries or questions or more the comment on that. So one thing I can just tell you before I close that the architectural marvels what you find in India are so varied, and the period in which they spread and the area in which they spread is beyond someone's lifetime work. Even if someone concentrate on a one type of architecture, it is not going to be sufficient to work on that. And this variation, the kind of evidence what we have in different form, itself tells us that what the knowledge we Indians had about architecture in our history. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. A very beautiful, indeed, wonderful lecture. And definitely, our all participant within this 1 hour roam all around India, actually from south to north and everywhere we go with you, with your presentation. And the most important thing we learn from your lecture that what we missed actually, we have to start speaking with the building, with the architecture. We have to read the instructions what they provided us. Actually this is मतलब necessary कि हम communication start करें building से, तब हम उसे और अच्छे से जान पाएंगे and we can connect with our past, मतलब ancestors से connect हो पाएंगे कि what is the reason to build that architecture एंड क्या उनको प्रॉब्लम हुई थी, क्या मतलब उन्होंने क्या किस तरीके से बनाया था, क्या साइंस था बिहाइंड दीज ऑल स्ट्रक्चर्स. वंडरफुल. एक्चुअली बहुत ही, मुझे तो बहुत अच्छा लगा ये सुनकर एंड डेफिनेटली आवर पार्टिसिपेंट्स आल्सो एंजॉयड अ लॉट. आपने बात करी डिफरेंट स्टाइल्स और पर्पस की. कुछ आर्किटेक्चर आज हमारे पास है, कुछ नहीं है, किसी कारणवश नहीं हुए हैं हमारे पास. आपने बड़ा अच्छा एग्जांपल्स उसका दिया हुआ है कि जैसे आपने ग्रेव स्ट्रक्चर्स भी लिया आपने, मतलब यू रोम ऑल अराउंड दी थिंग्स. मतलब सारे, मुझे लग रहा है सारे आर्किटेक्चर्स ही आपने 1 घंटे में ही हमें सारे दिखा दिए, मतलब ओवरऑल. और हमारा क्या, मतलब ट्रेडिशनल नॉलेज क्या था कि उनको बनाने के लिए, जैसे आपने बड़ा अच्छा एक एग्जांपल लिया था जिसमें वहां पर वो टेक्टोनिक उसका था, तो उनकी स्टेबिलिटी के लिए ही उन्होंने उस तरीके का मटेरियल यूज किया. तो वंडरफुली, मतलब डेफिनेटली आवर एंसेस्टर्स आर मोर इंटेलिजेंट, मोर नॉलेजेबल फ्रॉम अस, क्योंकि वो जानते थे उस चीजों को और उन्होंने उस हिसाब से काम किया. आपने अलग अलग आर्क रॉ का स्ट्रक्चर और डिफरेंट काइंड ऑफ स्ट्रक्चर्स की बात करी, उनमें वेरिएशंस की बात करी, तो वंडरफुल, आई थरोली एंजॉय एंड ऑल पार्टिसिपेंट्स एंजॉय। डेफिनेटली सर, आपने एक तो हमारा इनविटेशन एक्सेप्ट किया इतने शॉर्ट ड्यूरेशन में, वी आर वेरी मच थैंकफुल टू यू, एंड इतनी अच्छी इंफॉर्मेशन आपने शेयर करी, दैट्स अमेजिंग सर, थैंक्स अ लॉट फॉर with us. Thank you very much, sir. If any participant have any questions, so they can ask. सर थोड़ी टाइम के लिए, मतलब मुझे पता है सर बहुत बिजी है, पर थोड़े टाइम के लिए सर रुकेंगे, अगर किसी का
Sir,
कोई क्वेश्चन है तो।
sir, I have a question. I am Dr. Harshvardhan. सर
जी जी।
जैसा हमने जैसे पढ़ा है और सुना भी है कि हमारे टेम्पल्स जो हैं वो हमारी ह्यूमन बॉडी को कॉन्फ़िगरेट करते हुए जो है वो बनाए गए थे, जिससे कि हम गॉड रियलाइजेशन को जो है वो प्राप्त कर सकें। सर इस पे आप थोड़ा सा प्रकाश डालने की वो करें।
वास्तु शास्त्र में जो एक उसकी कल्पना की गई है, या जब हम उसके प्लान की बात करते हैं, तो उसमें वास्तु पुरुष का कॉन्सेप्ट है, और इसको जो
जी
है
सर।
पुरुष के रूप में देखा गया है या जिसको माना गया है, और उसके आधार पर उसके जो विभिन्न भाग हैं उनके नाम भी उसी प्रकार से दिए गए हैं। सो
जी
दैट्स अ
सर।
पार्ट ऑफ हाउ यू डिस्क्राइब इट।
जी
दो
सर।
बातें हैं, एक आपने एक और जो बात कही है कि हमने पढ़ा है, तो
जी सर।
पढ़ने का जो है उसमें, यानी आई वुड से विच आई टेल टू माय स्टूडेंट्स, कि जो पढ़ा है उसको पढ़ें, लेकिन उसी को सत्य भी न मान लें। आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट सेकेंडरी सोर्सेस,
जी सर।
है ना? क्योंकि हर व्यक्ति अपनी कल्पना, अपनी क्षमता के आधार पर चीजों को देखने की और व्याख्यायित करने की कोशिश करता है। लेकिन ये बात हमेशा मानिए कि जो लिखा जा चुका है या जाना जा चुका है, उसके बियॉन्ड जानने की हमेशा गुंजाइश रहती है।
जी सर।
और मैं अपना उदाहरण देना चाहूंगा, यानी आई एम जस्ट गिविंग वन एग्जांपल। द आई पास माई मास्टर्स, आई जॉइंड आर्कियोलॉजिकल सर्वे ऑफ इंडिया, आई रेड ए बुक, और एक किताब, यानी वो किताब लिखने वाले जो थे वो वाइस चांसलर थे उस समय, एक भारत की बहुत प्रसिद्ध यूनिवर्सिटी में। और उस किताब में उन्होंने लिखा कि यहाँ मैं, आई वॉज पोस्टेड इन खजुराहो, उन्होंने लिखा खजुराहो में ये नहीं है, एंड आई पिक दैट वर्ड कि ऐसा कैसे हो सकता है कि नहीं है। और मैं
हम्म।
उसके पीछे लगा रहा, और मैंने जो उन्होंने नहीं लिखा था वो 10-20 निकाल डाले। तो मैं
जी।
सिर्फ ये कहना चाहता हूँ कि जितना हम जान पाए हैं पढ़ के दूसरों से, बहुत अच्छी बात है, लेकिन उसके बियॉन्ड हमको जानने की कोशिश करना चाहिए, और हमको बस ये मान लेना नहीं चाहिए कि किसी ने कुछ कहा तो हम वहीं रुक गए। तो
जी।
उसके बियॉन्ड भी जानने की बहुत स्कोप रहती है। वास्तु पुरुष के बारे में, वास्तुशास्त्र के बारे में काफी कुछ लिखा जा चुका है, लेकिन उससे बियॉन्ड भी अभी और हम उसको समझ सकते हैं। और हर चीज में, इंट्रोडक्शन वाले दिन भी मैंने कहा था कि हर चीज में हमको जो सबसे पहली चीज जो है वो वाय रखना चाहिए, क्यों को जानने की हमारी जो है ना वो प्रवृत्ति होनी चाहिए। कि
जी।
वास्तु
जी।
पुरुष है तो क्यों है, वो ऐसे पांव मोड़ के बैठा, क्योंकि स्क्वायर में अगर आपने देखा हो वास्तु पुरुष की जो यानी ड्राइंग होती है या उसका कॉन्सेप्ट है, तो उसको इस उसमें वो कैसे आता है, क्योंकि हमारे जो महर्षि रहे हैं उनकी भी अपनी एक यानी परंपरा रही है सोच की। तो उस सोच को समझने तक हम लोगों को प्रयास करना चाहिए, क्योंकि हमको जो मिलता है वो एक उसका बहुत ही सूक्ष्म भाग है, और
जी।
उससे हम कैसे पकड़ के आगे बढ़ सकें, ये हमारा प्रयास रहना चाहिए।
जी। थैंक यू सर।
थैंक यू सर। एनी मोर क्वेश्चन वी हैव, और है किसी का कोई क्वेश्चन? सर कोई क्वेश्चन होगा तो डेफिनेटली विल।
यू कैन ईमेल मी, आई विल बी हैप्पी टू
यस।
रिप्लाई।
यस। एंड
थैंक यू।
थैंक्स अ लॉट सर फॉर जुड़ने के लिए और हमारी संस्कृति से जुड़ने के लिए, हमारी इंजीनियर एंड टेक्नोलॉजी से वापस हमें जुड़वाने के लिए। डेफिनेटली अब हम जब भी जाएंगे तो हम स्ट्रक्चर्स से बात करेंगे और उसको फॉलो करेंगे कि हम उस
और
तरीके से
विशेष
करें।
करके अगर कोई टूटा हुआ भाग आपको कभी दिखाई दे किसी भी स्ट्रक्चर का,
जी।
यानी सजे वाले तो हैं, वहां पे उसके अंदर क्या है वो दिखाई नहीं देता, कहीं अगर टूटा हुआ भाग दिखाई दे, उसको अगर आप बहुत क्लियरली ऑब्जर्व करेंगे तो आपको शायद वो सब जानने को मिलेगा जो आप उसे बाहर या सजे में देख के कभी नहीं समझ पाते। तो
जी
have a just observation is the main thing. Observe the thing and then you will find that यानी certain things are even beyond our imagination and thinking, बट फिर भी आपको समझ में आएगा और आश्चर्य होगा कि ये इस समय में कैसे उन लोगों ने क्या क्या बनाया और क्यों बनाया होगा। तो जितना हम लोग समझ सकते हैं उतना हमारे प्रयास होने चाहिए। We will
थैंक यू
be
सर,
able to
थैंक यू फॉर
appreciate more
जॉइनिंग अस।
to our ancestors.
थैंक यू सर, थैंक्स
Okay.
अ लॉट, थैंक्स।
नमस्कार।